And the United Kingdom gets from the public 0 points.
For years, the UK were a laughingstock at Eurovision. Despite being a global music behemoth, our results have varied from disappointingly below expectations to downright embarrassing. Year after year, we sent songs that were cliché, boring, or just downright ridiculous. Fans accused the BBC of not caring and lacking effort, while the media and public at large rolled out the old tiresome argument of Europe hates us.
Knowing that the rest of the continent, in what is a political contest in terms of voting, they hate us, it's because of Brexit.
Finally, at the 2021 contest in Rotterdam, a crisis point was reached when James Newman received the worst result ever in the contest's 68-year history, nil point, twice. One from the juries and one from the public. As the BBC Eurovision team held their annual post-ESC head-scratch on what to do next year, they decided that enough was enough. If the UK was to ever start receiving decent results again, it was going to require some actual hard graft and a complete overhaul of the system. The rest, as they say, is history. In this documentary, we'll examine the UK's recent stint at the Eurovision Song Contest, from flying high with Sam Ryder in 2022 and hosting in 2023, to ensuring that we don't return to the old ways and trends in 2024 and beyond. "2022 was seen as the UK's Anouk moment, the beginning of a new era in which we'd return to being a Eurovision powerhouse and eventually win for a sixth time.
This kind of single-handedly demolished this perception that the UK can't do well. So many different countries all putting Sam in the top 10 of the televote. And I think the televote's more important than the jury because really that's the bigger one to sell success to potential artists. You know, you can come top 10 in all the juries, but that's not going to sell records or get you concerts. What translates into success in the real world is the televote. That's the one that's correlated with Spotify streams, people wanting to come to your concert, etc., etc. So I think the success of Sam in 2022 makes the job of the British delegation so much easier in trying to recruit people, because now they don't just have to say, take my word for it, eventually a British artist will do well. They can just show the results. Look, Sam got points from 35 plus different countries with a very British song, a very British look, very British staging. It wasn't like the UK sold out to a different music genre or something. This is very quintessentially UK.
Well, I think that 2022 and Sam Ryder was the moment when we realised that the UK are taking Eurovision more seriously and putting the effort in. And it actually felt like the first time in forever that we're actually sending something competitive and something pushing for the win and changing public perception of the UK in Eurovision and just making everything more positive.
Another positive effect from Sam Ryder was just seeing the support that he got. So his staging looked amazing. You know, he just got good support in terms of promotion and just funding for his participation in the contest. So again, it's easier to sell that to a future artist saying, look, we're really going to support you. Some countries have no budget for staging whatsoever. The UK can be like, hey, we got him a rocket on the stage. So we can probably do the same for you as well.
While the UK's entry for 2023, I Wrote a Song by Mae Muller, was positively received by many, it ultimately failed to make much of an impression on the night. Multiple factors, some avoidable and some the fault of nobody, were to blame. One person observed that there was clearly merit in sending a current radio-friendly song, but they simply misjudged it. However, it was still far better than most of our post-2000 entries and a genuine effort. Let's not forget that host countries usually score poorly, even Ukraine, one of the most consistently high-scoring countries, who came third to last in 2017.
Obviously, Mae's result was not ideal. I still think she was a great representative. She was very bubbly, really well liked, fantastic personality. A little bit sad that she didn't pick a song that was a little bit more a little bit easier for her to sing so that she could have shown off her talents a bit more. Like she's just released her album now and she's got lots of great songs, which I feel would have been easier for her to perform, but I still think that she was a great representative.
But I do think we need to work on with the announcement of the artist, I think probably prior to the song, because the only concern with May's selection was mainly not to do with May herself. It was more to do with because it wasn't this person or this one or this person either.
Further cementing the UK's new credibility at the contest was Freya Sky's respectable finish at the Junior Eurovision Song Contest, and also hosting the main contest this year on behalf of Ukraine. As host broadcaster, the BBC really went the extra mile. Announcements and reveals, normally consigned to press releases and social media posts, were actively drummed up on primetime TV and radio. The allocation draw was refreshed from an unexciting lunchtime affair, more akin to a parish council meeting, to an entertaining, streamlined, primetime made-for-television event. The royals were called in, there was a never-done-before stage reveal, and additional of Eurovision programming across BBC platforms. The BBC Eurovision socials dished out an endless stream of postcard teasers, skits and sketches, and even more. The One Show migrated to Liverpool for the week, covering little else besides the contest, and as for the live shows, they were among the best we've ever seen, with innovative postcards, emotional and spectacular interval acts, and hosts that were genuinely funny, as opposed to trying to be. If the BBC was going to host Eurovision, they were going to milk it for all it was worth.
I think they did a really good job. I expected as much. The BBC know how to handle major events, the Olympics, Commonwealth Games, you name it, the BBC's done it at some point. And so I wasn't really concerned.
I think it was one of the best Eurovisions in recent memory. The staging was amazing. The hosts were fantastic. Hannah Waddington potentially has overtaken Petra Meda as the best host of the 21st century, in my opinion. All the other hosts were great as well. We had some great songs, which also helped as well with this year. And also just the stuff around Liverpool. I know that's not necessarily the BBC solely, but it is a factor. Like, Eurovision Village was buzzing. It was a great Eurovision Village. And the whole of Liverpool was sort of transformed into a big Eurovision city. It didn't feel like Liverpool. It felt like, Eurovision world, which is fantastic.
Very slick. Getting Graham Norton to do it as well, somebody who is so famous, the voice of Eurovision for years now. Getting him for the final, I think, was really excellent. When I first saw the hosting team, I was a little bit unsure about it because they weren't names I would have gone with, but actually they all worked well together.
And look, the only negative, I suppose, is the idea that they were going to do that X Factor style qualifier announcements, but they ditched those. So, you can't really complain too much. And also, it was, on a personal note, it was nice to see, standing up crowds again, which I thoroughly enjoyed. So yeah, I thought they did a fantastic job of hosting and also incorporating the Ukrainian aspects. Oh, and how can I forget? Some of the best interval acts we've had. Like the songbook, fantastic. The drag queens were a load of fun in semi-final 2. Alyosha and Rebecca Ferguson in semi-final 1. The list goes on and on. The interval acts, absolutely incredible. So yeah, I thought they did an amazing job.
I'll say, of course, is that it wasn't really the UK's show this year, it was Ukraine's, and I think it was right, absolutely, that the show had a very Ukrainian slant to it, and I think having Yulia Samina as one of the hosts, that was great. Having those Ukrainian acts in the flag parade thing, that was great. Having so many events in Liverpool around the time of the contest as well to do with Ukraine and Ukrainian culture, also fantastic. Making people feel really welcome, absolutely terrific stuff. And also having all of those Ukrainian fans with the cheap tickets in the arena as well for the final. That was a nice touch. So I do think the BBC handled that very nicely. And I'm not saying that other broadcasters wouldn't have done the same, but I think the BBC absolutely embraced it very quickly.
Nevertheless, all is not lost. Despite the poor results and the unfortunate, albeit not unexpected, departure of tap music, the BBC appear to have got back up, dusted themselves off, and focused on keeping up the hard work for 2024. This Spanish fan noted that, as someone from Spain, I could relate to this situation a ton, because our country has improved the game with Benidorm Fest, and I must say, I really think the UK is trying hard lately, and they are slowly improving their entries. So how did the BBC ensure Sam Ryder wasn't a fluke? and that the UK becomes a Eurovision powerhouse once again.
They should just keep doing what tap music were doing, which was finding up-and-coming names, enthusiastic musicians, people who could go on to have stellar careers after the contest as well. Sam Ryder's done so well for himself. Mae Muller's album's coming out soon, as I mentioned previously. And I think we need to continue doing that. Personally, I'd like to see a band next year. I think we should stick with internal selections for years to come, because I don't trust the British public in a national final to vote for the right song whatsoever, as has been seen in the past.
What I think the UK need to do, what I would like to see from the UK, is to sing something completely different. And I mean a different type of music, a different genre, not just pop, but explore other types of music that are very popular in the UK, like sending a rock band or an indie band, just something different that showcases another side of our music. And I think the rest of Europe will appreciate that as well.
I think we have kind of neglected a music scene in the UK that is there and is prominent in kind of different pockets of the United Kingdom, and that's Bollywood music or Bhangra music or Punjabi music. We have a significant South Asian community in the United Kingdom, and BBC Asia, which is a radio station that promotes that music, would be a great kind of source to kind of gather that. It would be a risk. I personally would like it. I'm a massive fan of Bollywood-inspired music particularly, but also Punjabi beats. I love it. I think it'd be a huge risk. I don't know if it would really play off at Eurovision, but I think at the end of the day, if we're, trying to find a direction somewhere.
I don't think the British delegation is going into this with preconceptions. I don't think they're like, we want specifically this type of person or this type of sound. I think they just want something that's going to do well. So I think they're going to go into the selection process with a really, really open mind. I think they'll be focusing more on the song than the artist. Really, we've seen in the past that sending a big name artist isn't going to get the job done. You need a good song. Obviously, you want the performer to be able to perform it to the best of their abilities, so you can maximize the song as much as possible. But the number one priority is find a great song. Ideally, something that's very quintessentially British, but it's a little bit beggars can't be choosers. I think that they just want something that's going to do well and hopefully get them onto the left side of the scoreboard.
As well, they need a really stellar act, somebody who can do the business live, somebody who's confident, somebody who's not going to be fazed by this necessarily, and a song that has life to it, if you can see what I mean. A song that, well before Eurovision comes around, it's being played on the radio, it's getting promoted so much, people are loving it, and then after the contest, it's still really popular.
We need to look at the source material in terms of what did work. And I'm not saying you've got to send Sam Ryder every year or you've got to send that style of song, but you've got to look at what qualities work with Sam Ryder. He has a unique look. He has an amazing voice, which I think is very crucial. And the staging was fantastic. The staging was, looked high quality. And also one thing I think is a key element to a Eurovision entry doing well is making it seem like something you wouldn't get regular. Like, the part of the issue why girl bops sometimes struggle a bit, like Blanca, Mae Muller, is because you can get those regularly. It didn't feel like a special performance, whereas Sam Ryder felt special when going off into other countries. Chanel felt like a unique spectacle. Fuego felt like that. Netta felt like that. Even like Duncan Lawrence, that one's more like the song just being spectacular, but, the stage element didn't feel like just something you'd see on a live show, you know what I mean? So what we need to do is we need to hone in what worked well with Sam and just portray it. It needs to be special. That's what a good Eurovision entry needs to be. It needs to be something that makes you remember it, makes you go, wow, I need to vote for this. How we do that in the long-term future, whether we eventually transition into a national final, I think for a good national final, I think we need a string of sustained good results, decent results at the very least. I know Spain have sort of done a good transition into national finals from, bad results. But I don't know. I feel with the UK, we need a bit more persuading with the artists. That's another good key thing. We need artists that know their style, because Even though Mae Muller flopped, she knows her style. Sam knows his style, and that's where it translates.
I think the BBC are definitely taking this Eurovision much more seriously now, whereas before they weren't really much bothering because they were already paying quite so much, so they didn't really care about the result anymore. Whereas recently, these past few years, they've suddenly realised, oh, they've actually took it more seriously. Oh, they get more views. That's what the change is. And I definitely think that also helped drastically in terms for Liverpool. I think hosting the event as well really gave it a good platform over here. So hopefully that continues forwards into Malmö in the future.
Yes, I do believe the BBC are taking Eurovision a lot more seriously, and you can see that, I would say, from like 2019 to 2023 now. Lee Smithhurst, that is when Lee Smithhurst, the assistant, maybe not the right word, but like when he came into the fold for Eurovision entries. Every year up until Sam Ryder, something changed. So we went from, in 2018, a regular national final to one where 3 songs were selected for 6 artists. Obviously, that one didn't work, but what he did was he changed it again. We went internal, and we went with BMG Music Industries. I might be mispronouncing that, but I believe that's the name. Went with James Newman. Again, didn't work. Obviously, we had him back-to-back years. COVID, I sort of let slide a little bit. 2021, but then we changed it again to tap music, and that's when we found our success with Sam Ryder. So from that aspect, that's the evidence of like we're constantly changing to try and actually improve our result rather than staying at the bottom. And look, while it didn't work out with Mae Muller in 2023, you saw that we stuck with a method that worked back in 2022.
In the past, it's felt to me as though the BBC have just opted for a singer to fulfill a role, which is perform at Eurovision. There's no aftermath. I mean, I look at people like Michael Rice, obviously we've had Electro Velvet, Joe and Jake, and with all due respect to those musicians, they have faded into the background. I couldn't tell you what they're doing these days. Whereas Sam Ryder, his career just goes up and up and up, and Mae Muller's debut album's coming out very soon, and you know, she's still appearing on TV and everything. So now it feels as though the BBC are looking for somebody, Tap Music, of course, who are no longer involved, but it seems as though the two of them were working together to find artists who would do well at Eurovision, but also there would be longevity afterwards. And that's great, because Eurovision is a stepping stone for so many musicians, and that is something that they should be looking at by themselves, because Tap Music have upped and left, unfortunately. But the BBC need to be looking for another up-and-coming name, somebody who could have a really stellar career afterwards in the UK as well.
But much more high-profile artists, even though they're not Ed Sheeran, they're not Adele, but they are like decent names in the music industry compared to Michael Rice and James Newman. James Newman, more known as a songwriter, and Michael Rice is known for reality TV music. They were not established artists. Unlike Sam Ryder and Mae Muller, who you could tell with their style of song knew what they were doing. And this, I would argue that the music video quality was better with those two, and the staging quality was better with those two. It felt like there was effort being put into those ones. Whereas James Newman, Michael Rice, and you could argue maybe like Suri, Joe and Jake, you know, a few others were sort of like the UK saying we are trying rather than actually trying, you know, putting the minimal effort in, sending something decent but not outstanding.
I do think the BBC are taking it a bit more seriously, arguably more seriously than they've taken it for many, many years. And I think a lot of that is to do with the BBC's co-hosting of this year's event with the Ukrainian broadcaster. I think social media plays a big part. Definitely, I think in the off-season, obviously, there's very little to comment on, but when Eurovision is coming around again, you know, we had a really cool advert on TV, there's lots of activity on Instagram and Twitter and other social media pages as well, and also just on television, you know, on BBC Breakfast, on other chat shows as well. Eurovision, certainly this year, and I would say to some extent last year too, for the Turin stage show, it just seems as though Eurovision is mentioned a lot more frequently on television, to the point where maybe you can't help but not hear about it. And that's a pretty good thing. And also, obviously, the semi-finals were on BBC One this year. They're going to be on BBC One again next year. That, to me, is a sign that they're taking it a bit more seriously.
Sam Ryder has provided the proof for the UK, and that's what all these countries that are struggling need. They need the proof. That's why Chanel was so important for Spain. That's why Michael Schotz was so important for Germany. There's no excuse for poor results or blaming political voting or anything like that, outside factors. There's no excuse for blaming that when there's a proof that you can do well. Like the arguments about Brexit and Eurovision or Europe hates us have sort of died down a bit since Sam Ryder finished in second, and deservingly so, because at the end of the day, all this stuff happened after Brexit, after the claims of Europe hating us. There's no barriers, or there shouldn't be anyway, stopping the UK from doing well, and we proved that. Every country in 2022 voted for us apart from Croatia. How can you say Europe hates us and Australia hates us after that?
Personally, I don't actually think that the issues in the past were to do with BBC and the British delegation. I always feel like they were invested enough. For me, the issue was, I think, established British acts and kind of the better acts that the UK wanted to send felt that Eurovision was too risky, because they didn't want to put themselves forward and then not win a national final or not do well and then have that as a kind of smudge on their career. So I've just felt a lot of them felt that the risk wasn't worth the reward, and also that maybe they didn't feel like it was an even playing field. So maybe there was a perception in the public or with established artists that there was a bias against the UK for whatever reason, just based on the history of the UK just not getting very good results. And they felt that even if they did send something good, they weren't going to get a fair shot. So why would they risk their careers if they're not even going to be fair in the first place? I don't know if I would totally agree with that perception, because at the end of the day, the UK songs weren't exactly doing great in the UK charts. Like 2011, Blue went to 16 in the UK charts, but that was the highest ranking one. No one else since 2011 went top 20 in the charts, and the last time the UK were top 10 in the charts was Scooch in 2007. So although I think a lot of artists felt were not being received fairly, British people didn't like the songs either. No top 10 songs since 2007. I think that's pretty damning that everyone didn't really like the songs that much.
I really don't have expectations for the UK, because at the end of the day, it's more about trust. I trust Lee Smithhurst and the team to have the best intentions of the UK at heart. And to be fair, even like without tap music, we did see what they did in Junior Eurovision in 2022. That was really good. Let's hope they continue that on in 2023. And then you do have definitely more trust in the UK than in previous years, because we've even seen with Mae Muller, the song was received very well compared to previous years. It was received well. There was just some factors that meant it didn't do as well actually in Liverpool. So fascinating to see. I know this doesn't really answer the question, because I don't know. I really don't know. It's at the end of the day, it's one since people would say we've changed our fortunes around. We've had one good result and one bad result. And the bad result does not mean we're on a higher trajectory, and the good result doesn't necessarily mean we are on that, if that makes any sense. That contrast sort of balance it out. So I'm fascinated to see, but what I do know is for a fact that the UK, I have a bit more faith in the UK and the BBC, because they have proven to not only me, but to themselves, they can do well.